welcome to Rambling Roxy's Adventures Through History. I know I promised you a little while ago that I would delve more deeply into mounds, and today we're going to do that. Yay! Did you know that some of Ohio's mound groups are becoming UNESCO World Heritage Sites? What? That's crazy. Well, not really that crazy, but that's crazy exciting. That means that they are protected internationally and recognizes their importance to the entire world. Stonehenge and the pyramids are other World Heritage Sites that UNESCO protects. This shows how important Ohio's past and its cultures are to the present-day world. While not the first site discovered, Fort Ancient in Oregonia, Ohio, was Ohio's first state park, which was established in 1891. It's North America's largest hilltop fort and was built over 2,000 years ago. This is kind of a computer rendering of what the fort would look like if the site was cleared out. I've been there and it's really awesome, but a lot of this site is now grown up with trees, so it doesn't quite look the same now. But that's a good rendition of what it would look like. Here's a scale drawing of what it looked like when some of the settlers first came to Ohio and they discovered that there was this huge mound site here. And here's how it looks today. As you can see part of the hill structure here, and that goes around everywhere. There's walking paths and you can witness a lot of the site. There's also a fun village that's recreated there, and you can go visit it and see what the Fort Ancient Cultures villages look like. Oh, wait, what did you ask? What are mounds, you say? Oh my, I've gotten a little bit ahead of myself. Oopsie daisy, I've rambled too far. Let's back up. A mound refers to the structures built typically from dirt, rocks, and sometimes shells in coastal areas. Yeah, Ohio is not the only places with mounds. Florida has them, Mississippi, Missouri, all around the north, the Midwest, and the Southeast has mounds. Many of these mounds are built in layers with dirt, then rock. And while there's no written record of how these structures, some over 650 feet tall or 6 stories high, were built, we can make educated guesses based on archaeological findings. Since we haven't found any ancient bulldozers near these sites, we can assume that they were built by hand and by piling these rocks and dirt on top of each other. Many archaeologists believe that they used woven baskets to carry the dirt after they dug it and then dump it on the site and then pack it down. But this would take many, many hands. Now imagine building a sandcastle at the beach. If you've ever built a huge one with your family, you know it takes many people working together and a lot of planning. You don't see those big sandcastles out there that people just kind of start throwing sand together with no rhyme or reason. Now imagine building a 6-story mound or a whole complex of them. These cultures were very smart and sophisticated. It took a lot of teamwork to make the dream work. We are not 100% sure why these mounds were built, because again, there is no written record that we found. Maybe there was stuff written down and those things have since deteriorated and we can't find them anymore. But there's no written record that we found. And seeing how there's over 10,000 mounds built here in Ohio alone, there must have been an important reason to do this. Some mounds are effigy mounds or animal-shaped, such as Serpent Mound. Some are cones, like the Miamisburg Mound. This one happens to be over 650 feet tall. And others are platforms. And some have what is most likely an important person buried in them. There's not a large amount of people found in any of these mounds, so we're assuming when you find just a single grave that this was probably an important leader of the time and not just a cemetery for an entire village. Now, not all mounds have people buried in them. And as you can see on this map, this shows you all the different mounds here in Ohio. That's a lot of mounds. Another important map. So as we've been learning about the mounds, this tells us that these mounds were multi-purpose. It means they didn't just have, like, not all the mounds had one specific purpose. Maybe mounds were built for different reasons. Much like in a city, we have lots of big buildings, but each building might have a different purpose. But they were all extremely important to the society, otherwise they wouldn't spend all that time building them. Many of these sites also align with astronomical events. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Such as the solstice or the equinox. Astronomical events are where the stars and moon and the sun align at specific times of the year. Like the solstice is when the days and nights are the shortest or the longest, and the equinox are when the days are the same amount of day and night. And these things are kind of like a calendar. And the reasons why this is important are farmers need to know when to plant their crops. And when we can use these points of reference on the calendar, they can kind of determine when spring was coming and when it would be a good time to plant the crops. It wouldn't be a good idea to plant stuff during the winter solstice and there's hardly any sunlight out there, and things would probably freeze, right? Many archaeologists believe that the mounds were made for religious and ceremonial purposes. I know it seems crazy to put so much effort into building, but that's one thing all people have in common. Think of our churches and state houses today. We put a lot of effort into our important places. Now, let's see some of those awesome sites. As I've showed you before, we have Serpent Mound, which was an effigy mound. And it's shaped like, you guessed it, a snake. So far, no artifacts have been found inside, but radiocarbon dating puts it at about 1,500 years old. This site was also the site of a crater from a meteorite, so maybe ancient cultures knew that this site was important. It's about 3 feet high, and it's 1,348 feet long. Wow, so much teamwork to create this, plus planning out this cool snake, right? And then we have the Miamisburg Mound, the largest cone-shaped mound at 650 feet tall. Also, think of that like a 6-story building. This was built by the Adena culture. And then we have the Newark Earthworks. This is a computer rendering of what they would have looked like when they were all intact. Since the city of Newark has been built, some of these mounds have been destroyed through the building of the city as Newark was settled. But you can still go see parts of them today. This right here. I've been there. It's really cool. Great park to walk around. Lots of really old trees. Not the trees that were there originally, of course. But it's still a really cool place to walk around, and they have a great museum. And here's the Hopewell Cultural Site in Chillicothe. This one is also one of the ones up for the UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a large mound group, and it's surrounded by an earthen wall. So all these mounds in here are different sizes, and they kind of come together in an interesting shape. And of the 10,000 mounds here in Ohio, many of them were destroyed by farming and town building by the early European settlers. The mounds were no longer in use at the time, so it kind of looked like this when the settlers came, or even more overgrown with trees like the Fort Ancient site. And they really weren't sure if it was a mound or a hill. I mean, think of it. They came here and they didn't know what this landscape looked like. And many people asked the native cultures living here at the time, like, who built this? And they weren't quite sure either. So they hadn't been in use for quite some time. But that's one of the reasons why the UNESCO World Heritage Site designation is so important, because it helps preserve these sites for the future. Imagine how cool it would have been to see all those 10,000 sites, and we might have understood more about these cultures and why they did the things they did. But sadly, over time, some of these things were just destroyed. In Marietta, there's a huge earthwork site there, and the early settlers tried to preserve as much as they could when they first got there. But a lot of it was also destroyed during later times. And this is why we have historical protection laws now. But don't be discouraged. There's still over 1,000 mounds that you can still visit. Some are large, complete sites, and some of them are just partially preserved small mounds that could have been bigger sites, but we'll never know. Actually, one of the examples is Story Mound in Chillicothe. There's like a little part of town that it just looks like a little backyard, and it's just a little mound in someone's backyard, and it's been beautifully preserved. And that's how a lot of them are around the state. We might not know where they are. Well, thank you for listening in, and I hope that you've learned a lot today and that you keep those questions coming and learning about Ohio history. Thanks for watching Rambling Roxy. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Did you stop it? I feel like I haven't been recording this entire time.